Hi everyone, welcome back to our closing session. Just a final reminder for those on Zoom that the event is being live streamed on the Melbourne Law School's YouTube channel, and we're recording the event and we'll be posting it online soon. So I'm going to now hand over to the team in Manila to both Genevieve House and Ben Lilly from the Health Law and Ethics Unit at Wipro.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, and our enormous gratitude to all of the participants and everybody who has contributed. So now wrapping up, myself and Ben Lilly will provide some comments. Next slide, please. So we're looking at experiences and lessons identified, just trying to draw out some themes of the very rich discussions that we've been having over the last 2 days. So some of the things that we have seen, most countries use their national legislation, saw how important it was to support their COVID response. For many, the legislation supporting the public health functions wasn't fit for purpose. Laws supporting basic health functions didn't always align with the health emergency powers, the national disaster laws that were needed as the risk escalated. And there was also an important alignment with across sectors and levels of government. Many countries did enact legislation to fill the gaps, and some of those laws have explicit sunset clauses, and others would be expected to be ongoing. Some public health and emergency laws were outdated. They didn't contemplate a pandemic of the scale of COVID-19 or the response strategies required. So this would include the need for a whole of society collaboration, the use of new technologies and other purposes. And for many, they're now looking at reviews post-COVID. Many of the challenges weren't new. The pandemic did reveal and exacerbate long-standing issues, which would include disparities and cracks in the health system. Laws beyond health did affect the response. Some laws, criminal laws, housing laws, laws about public finance, many other laws contributed to the impact on vulnerable people, and in some instances did hamper the efforts to detect cases and deliver COVID-19 related services. In our rush to respond, at times clouded our focus on the health and safety of healthcare workers and the rights of patients, including to culturally appropriate care. Changes in employment arrangements also had an impact. We also learnt that laws supporting data collection and use are of enormous importance. Managing communication was a challenge to most, and the ready availability of data, which is related to inform that communication, was also important, making sure that communities had access to the most recent science-based information. And laws that can support and impede this are relevant. And now I'll hand over to Ben.
Thanks, Genevieve. We heard that trust and effectiveness of digital health interventions are strongly interrelated, and that legal frameworks played an important role in ensuring that digital interventions used in the COVID-19 response were trustworthy, and they exhibited competence, integrity, and beneficence. We heard that this could have a positive impact on voluntary uptake and acceptance where laws were established and implemented effectively, and particularly where they sought to address perceived risks, such as those associated with mission creep, offshore data storage and secondary use, especially by law. We heard about some of the barriers to the application of digital health technologies, and those included both limited legal and regulatory frameworks, as well as factors beyond the health system, such as ICT policies and infrastructure. We heard that the private sector played a significant role, including through the delivery of COVID-19 related services and the provision of medical supplies and vaccines, and that effective engagement helped to leverage their resources and capacities and to align it with national strategies. We also heard that political leadership has been essential to engaging the whole of government and whole of society in the response, and that legal frameworks can play a role in empowering leaders across the community. So now I'd like to turn to some possible directions for the future and some key points and common themes that we picked up in the conversations. The first is that there's a need to adopt a systems approach to building legal preparedness, and that is to consider, and that includes to consider actions are required to improve public health and health emergency laws, as well as other laws that have an impact on health during emergencies generally. There's opportunity to take practical steps to identify lessons and share experiences in real time. And that includes to record challenges and issues that may require further legislative change. And there's a need to look to integrate human rights principles within legal frameworks to help emergencies and to build the knowledge and capacity to implement and to have regard to those. There's a need to examine the legal and regulatory barriers faced by digital health technology during COVID-19 and to leverage our experiences to enable the appropriate effective use of technology for health applications beyond COVID-19. There's a need to explore mechanisms to promote greater multi-sectoral coordination and governance of our response efforts and the health system generally, including in the area of digital health. There's a need to examine the legal dimensions of privacy and public health in light of COVID-19 and recent advancements, as well as to consider measures to protect privacy in line with local needs and expectations. We need to consider mechanisms to address misinformation, while we also support effective risk communication and the transparent sharing of information with the public. We heard that people most vulnerable to NCDs were also often most vulnerable to COVID-19, and by intensifying legal action to address NCDs, we can also have a benefit for our preparedness for future health emergencies. We need to continue to support efforts to build the capacity of lawyers and policymakers involved in health law, and that includes through training and partnerships. And we also need to empower champions and build networks of practitioners, researchers, and advocates in our region. And that includes connecting with those working in the various subfields of health law, which is still very much an emerging field. So look, thanks again for all of your participation over the past 2 days and your contributions to the discussions. As was mentioned at the start of today's session, your contributions will be used to inform a meeting report being developed by WHO, which will be published. And it will also inform our thinking for how we can better support our member states and to work with our partners in the region to strengthen legal preparedness for the future. So thanks once again, and with that, I'll pass back to John.
Thanks so much, Ben and Genevieve. It's now my great pleasure to invite David Manning to give a keynote address. David Manning is Commissioner of Police and Controller of the National Pandemic Response in Papua New Guinea. So over to you, Mr. Manning. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jonathan. Well, thank you. Distinguished colleagues, good morning or good afternoon, as the case may be. It is indeed my great pleasure to provide a keynote address for this regional forum on law and COVID-19. Firstly, I'd like to begin by thanking each of the participants in this forum, whose wisdom and practical experience will guide our region in ensuring we have the laws and capacities we need to protect public health and to manage health risk in the future. I'd also like to thank the World Health Organization Regional Office for the Western Pacific for organizing this important event, which I've been informed is the first of its kind in our region, as well as our host, of course, the University of Melbourne. In Papua New Guinea, as with everywhere else, when we first heard about the emergence of a novel coronavirus in early 2020, we did not have the experience of a global pandemic of this scale. We had to work out how to manage as we went along. I'm sure this was very much the case for our neighbors. Before it reached PNG, we started our preparations, including looking at how our laws could help. We began with what we had. We had a 1953 Quarantine Act, and a 1973 Public Health Act. Mind you, both pieces of legislation predated our independence, and both were likely to be inconsistent with our Constitution, which came in 1975. Neither was fit to support a coordinated long-term response. Our Minister for Health began to issue orders under those laws, but there was some confusion about their scope and about how to include other important sectors such as immigration, foreign affairs, customs, police, finance, and others. When PNG confirmed the first local infections, including community transmission, a state of emergency was declared and temporary laws were made using available constitutional powers. That was when we first set up the National Control Centre, and I, as the Commissioner of Police, was appointed as the controller. Our National Executive Council recognised the need for a whole-of-government approach with clear leadership, which is why it formed the National Control Centre. I worked with the Department of Health and with other sectors which were represented in the NCC. I was able to use powers to issue directions and to take action for PNG's pandemic response. And as the pandemic has escalated and hotspots and risks evolved, we were constantly issuing notices and taking action under our available powers to try to manage the risk and respond to it. We had to understand each other and work together, which was sometimes hard. We faced many challenges, such as shortages of testing reagents, PPE, and available personnel. And of course, managing effective communication with our people and correcting misinformation. We needed to work with other parts of government and with our people. Sometimes they were frightened. They looked for leadership and for answers. Now, in Papua New Guinea, we love to talk about where we're from, our province, our home village, our wantoks. The pandemic doesn't care which province or village you're from. It crossed global borders to enter PNG and all domestic borders within PNG. It has affected all provinces and all communities and every man, woman, and child in our country. Sometimes it was hard to bring everyone together. We had to keep moving fast and changing our approach fast to try to keep up with the pandemic. As Police Commissioner, I'm always aware of the importance of law. In working in the NCC, it was our constant companion. It was not always a helpful one or a kind one. As the state of the emergency expired, the National Parliament passed another law called the National Pandemic Act of 2020. Its purpose was to keep the NCC going and give us the authority and power to continue to manage the pandemic response overseen by responsible ministers and the NEC. This law was always intended to be temporary and to get us through the immediate need to respond to COVID. We shouldn't expect the next health emergency to look like COVID-19. Papua New Guinea and the rest of our region faces new and emerging health threats, such as those associated with climate change and antimicrobial resistance. To be better prepared for the future, we need to strengthen our legal preparedness for all hazards and commit to ongoing efforts to continually improving them over time as we build back better. The last 18 months have been a deeply challenging time for all of us, both in our professional capacities and as individuals. Everyone has lost someone close to them in this pandemic. It has brought out both the best and worst in people. It has stretched our organizations beyond what they thought they were capable of withstanding and shown their fracture lines clearly. PNG was the first country to have our own pandemic legislation, empowering myself as delegated controller to have complete oversight and accountability of a joint agency response under the organizational umbrella termed the National Control Centre, or the NCC. The NCC evolved from two tangents: the need for cross-agency cooperation and the government's complete lack of faith in our National Department of Health. Prior to COVID, as Police Commissioner, I was aware of the regular scandals involving the department, corruption in drug supply purchases, continual outbreaks of preventable diseases, staff protests, and woefully dangerous immunization rates. just to name a few. However, I was not prepared for what I found to be the true nature of the health sector. In short, at the national level, the Department of Health has become little more than a shell that is managed by a cabal of multilateral agencies and INGOs. It is these organizations that manage the day-to-day direction of the department. Officers look to them to write their emails, to send them on trips, to write their plans, to do pretty much everything for them. The budget is managed by them. In the early stages of the pandemic, the world, through multiple donor partners, was very generous to PNG in terms of financial support. Our problem was that most of this money was intercepted by these parties using NDOH as a rubber stamp. While we were trying to run contact tracing at the NCC with volunteers, millions of dollars were given to NGOs to do the same job without informing us in the NCC. They undermined our data systems. They disobeyed my directions to set up parallel systems and advised the struggling disease surveillance team accordingly. And these systems clearly did not work. The country was told we were not having outbreaks and that our caseload was low, when in truth, it was 10 times as bad. We also confused our clinics by introducing new definitions and jargon of what suspect cases were called: SARI, or serious acute respiratory illness, and ILI. Subsequently, we have only investigated about 2.5% of the flu and pneumonia illnesses. Why and how could they do this? We're investigating this, but I can assure you it will not happen again. Embarrassingly, we are now at 1.5% national vaccination rate. This, as I said, is an embarrassment. We've had WHO or UNICEF lead on the risk communications to address vaccine hesitancy, not the National Department of Health. The funding given for use for educating people have since dried up, and half the country still does not even know where there is a vaccine available. Against the direction of the Prime Minister, we are managing this on little bits of green cards, which pass as a vaccination card. They can now be bought at the local markets. PNG definitely has a long way to go. As a country, we've taken responsibility for allowing our health sector to become parasitized by individuals and organizations that do not have our people at heart. This crisis cannot be put to waste. We will build back the health sector into something the whole country can be proud of. I'm unapologetic for these words. If these words upset some of you in the audience, however, I doubt that our experiences are unique in our region. Perhaps my experience will provide liberty to speak up. In the end, I'm accountable to the government of Papua New Guinea. Thousands, probably tens of thousands of people have died or will die that could have been avoided had this state of affairs not been allowed to develop. We have a duty to the survivors that is not enabled to continue. As I listen to other delegates, I can see that many experiences and challenges were shared across the region. Learning from each other, important lessons, and is important. Many of us discovered that our legislation did not serve us well in a health emergency. I hope that as PNG looks at its law reform needs post-COVID, a new understanding of common regional experiences and challenges can help us and teach us. We also have experience to offer and to share with other countries in our region. Finally, I'd like to thank WHO for bringing us all together over the last 2 days to help us to understand that we have neighbors and friends who have similar experiences and challenges and are ready to support us, learn from us, or even just remind us that we don't stand alone. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Manning, for sharing your experiences, some of the challenges and some of the lessons that you've learned over the period. Thank you. I'm going to, in a moment, invite Martin Taylor from Wipro to close. Just before I do, can I thank you all for your participation in what's been a fantastic event. Thanks to Wipro for the collaboration, in particular to Ben, Alyssa, and Genevieve. And I also want to give a big thanks to Catherine Taylor from the Asian Law Centre at Melbourne Law School, who's made everything work seamlessly at on the university's end. So thank you very much, everyone. And over to Martin Taylor, Director of Health Systems and Services Division at WHO Wipro.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. And thank you for all of your wonderful moderation to take us through these last few days. And it's a real honour actually to speak immediately after Commissioner Manning, who spoke so eloquently and honestly of some of the challenges faced in Papua New Guinea. I thank you, Commissioner Manning, for sharing those experiences with us. On behalf of WHO in the Western Pacific region, I'd like to thank everybody who has joined in the last few days and express my gratitude to those of you who have contributed as panelists, as discussants, and also have shared in the Padlet and the chat. And of course, I'd particularly like to thank our hosts, the University of Melbourne, Jonathan, and all of your team who have lent your experience in hosting virtual events and your technical expertise to make this forum such a successful event. This forum has brought together researchers, practitioners, and country-based colleagues, many of whom who are currently working to review and reform health laws, and some capturing the lessons and experiences and considering where further review is necessary. We've also heard from researchers and practitioners whose work can illuminate and inform our practice. It's of course always harder to connect in a virtual format, but despite these challenges, we found a big sense of shared experience and understanding coming through in these discussions. I think that's very, very clear, both in terms of the legal issues encountered and the challenges faced. And as some speakers have noted, some of these were well known as COVID emerged and some were new. COVID had a way of exposing many systems cracks that existed already, and these included weaknesses in our legal preparedness, both our existing laws and also the capacity to quickly and effectively implement them. Many country colleagues told us about their experience applying their laws and the limitations they faced. As they told us their stories, they also asked questions, asking how others managed similar conundrums. What was almost universal, I thought, was that as public health risk escalated from a small risk to a bigger and bigger risk, and then into a health emergency, and from there into a national and international emergency, few laws were able to keep up. It was hard to track available powers, and be clear about leadership responsibility as powers under different laws were triggered. Every country was different, but we heard about gaps in lines of authority, concerns about limitations on powers, about accountability in deploying broad powers limiting people's movements and affecting their lives and livelihoods. We also heard about the need to provide broad powers, but to balance them with accountability, oversight, and respect for the rule of law. We heard a lot about the importance of trust in governments and authorities in the uptake in use of digital technologies and acceptance of health measures generally. We heard about problems faced by frontline health workers and the amplification of systems cracks and where laws which protect rights have a huge role to play. We also discussed laws about the health sector that affect health and the importance, we discussed laws beyond the health sector that affect health and the importance of considering the broader legal determinants of health in order to strengthen legal preparedness. We were told about how important it was to engage the whole health system, which includes the private sector. And we were also reminded that legal preparedness isn't just a matter of what laws are on the books, but also the capacity to effectively utilize those laws across government and society and to adapt and make necessary changes in response to new challenges. Public health practitioners have always known that laws matter. Those who undertake surveillance and contact tracing, Those who work with infectious disease lists and notifications to manage epidemiology and everyday management of health risks rely on powers to support their day-to-day activity. Those who investigate complaints about rotten food at markets or an outbreak of measles in a primary school. That interest in health law is not always shared more broadly across sectors and leadership groups, but COVID has changed that. That understanding, once tightly held, broke out of its small group of practitioners and officers to include every sector and every person with a leadership role. This certainly adds complexity, but it provides an opportunity too. Our deliberations over the past 2 days have expanded our understanding that whatever our own country experienced during COVID-19, and however adequate or inadequate our laws were found to be, when we told our stories, they resonated with others. It was enormously useful to hear about research and other work to develop knowledge products which are very closely informed by what our country colleagues are telling us are needed. We will carefully tease out these themes as we draft our meeting report. We will also use our new understanding to inform our work with the broader WIPRO priorities for the future document, which sets out several themes, all of which were touched on in the past few days. Those themes are health security, NCDs and ageing, the health impacts of climate change and environmental changes, and reaching the unreached. We all benefit from a new perspective, which comes from listening to the experiences and work of others. For WHO, it will inform our work within our region and with our country offices and member states. We also look forward to continue to connect, to build on shared experience and shared challenges, and to grasp the momentum COVID-19 has given to re-examining health laws and laws affecting health. We look forward to continue our work with many of the people on this webinar to support member states across our region to make sure that they have the health laws that they need for the future. So thank you all for your participation. Thank you to the University of Melbourne again for hosting this event with us. And I hope you have all enjoyed it and found it as stimulating as I have, and wish you all a very good rest of the day. Back over to you, Jonathan.
I think that's it. I think you have the last word. So thank you very much, Martin. Yeah, WIPRO will be in touch with the meeting report, next steps, and we'll also be in touch when we post the edited version of the forum on the university's website. So thanks again, everyone.